Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this in the world. I hope you guys are doing okay. So, as you probably guessed by the title, we are talking about the recent Dead or Alive controversy that occurred on Twitter by way of a guy called Zachary, the Hokage. And I wanted to chime in and give my thoughts on this. Now, this went everywhere. It was on Button Check. Emery Reigns did a 1-hour live stream with the individual that made this tweet. And I wanted to read out some of the tweets and some of the backlash and reference a couple of things. Now, my knowledge on DOA is very limited on the competitive side. I never saw DOA as a competitive game. It always just seemed like a bit of dumb fun, but I've come to learn that it actually did have a scene, however small that might have been. It had a competitive scene, and there seems to be a clash between competitive players and more casual players. Now, I would definitely sit in the casual side. Now, before I get into these tweets, what I do want to say is that if you started attacking this individual because of his race, then you're an idiot. We should have kept this on the game. It should never get to doxing, attacking people on their race, sending death threats. No matter how stupid you might think the tweet is, you derail the conversation when that happens. And I'm on your side in terms of I think this is a bit of a dumb take, but when you take it to race, when you take it to doxing, when you take it to gender, when you take it to things that don't matter about the game, you kind of lose your argument. But I understand there's a lot of unhinged people online, but there are some tweets in here that are actually quite funny that made me laugh. So the tweet was, Dead or Alive 7 should stick to the winning formula of Dead or Alive 5, but with updated graphics and new moves. Remove the unnecessary meter mechanics and dial back on the overt sexualization of the female cast so everyone can fully embrace the game's competitive potential. I actually retweeted this and I was like, this guy sucked. I was just basically copying that popular SpongeBob meme.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
But I don't actually know this individual. I do think that this is a bit of a stupid take because I've always known DOA to be recognized for its jiggle physics and its very attractive women, not for its stellar gameplay or for its competitive scene. Now, I'm not saying it's not got either of those. I'm just aware of where the attention is on this game. I don't think anybody can really deny that the thing that brought DOA to the table was its look. The way the women look in this game are very appealing. There's jiggle physics. Now, I actually like DOA. Like I said, I didn't ever see it as a competitive game, but I definitely saw it as a very fun game. I had a lot of fun playing it. That's me playing it in the background now. I reinstalled it for the purpose of this video. I have never played DOA 6, but DOA 5 was a lot of fun. I thought it was a good game at least. I know it's not super popular, but it definitely scratches that itch of a bit of dumb fun for me. But Twitter was not happy with what this guy had said. Now, I think there's a couple reasons as to why. Obviously, DOA has been gone for a very long time now. DOA 6 failed horribly, and there's a couple of reasons for why. I believe one of the main reasons is that they dialed back the sexuality quite a bit, and what they did was they didn't remove the sexualized costumes from the game. It's just they made all the default costumes very covered up, and so it took away from the appeal that everybody came to know DOA for, and they put these sexual costumes behind an unlock wall where you'd have to play long periods of time on the game to get the bikini costumes or whatever that might be. Now, regardless of how you feel about the over-sexualization in DOA, the fact of the matter is that people knew this game for that. And when you take something away that the game is known for, the existing fan base is not going to be happy. The competitive scene in fighting games is already very small. We are less than 1% of that scene. And if you take that and then apply it to DOA, who has an even smaller scene than Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Tekken, Dragon Ball FighterZ, and Guilty Gear, DOA is probably one of the smallest. And you take that percentage that already exists with the bigger games and apply it to DOA, the competitive scene is, for lack of a better word, insignificant. I mean, it might even be fair to say that the competitive scene for most fighting games are insignificant, but that rings true for DOA more than any of them, in my opinion. The other thing is that they added mechanics to the game that people weren't really happy with. There was a meter that was added to the game from what I could see from what my friend was playing. They didn't seem very happy with it. And from what I could understand about DOA, even though I never indulged in it, is that it has an abundance of DLC, over the top monetization, season passes coming out of its arse, and I think people were just like, this is too much, and everyone just turned off the game. So in the pursuit of trying to move into esports, they alienated their small existing fan base, didn't capture the esports audience because they were too busy with Tekken and Street Fighter, and there was just not enough competitive players to move over, and so it died over there, and it died where it made its money. So let's get into some of the tweets. I'll read them out to you. Some of them are quite funny, some of them are a little bit out of pocket in my opinion. Like I said, you can flame somebody for their opinion, but when you bring race into it, you kind of look like a moron. So NEH says, no, Dead or Alive 7 needs more overt sexualization, bigger boobs, more bounce physics, and a splash screen every time the game boots that explicitly states that the competitive scene, the fighting game community, and the fictional modern audience can F right off. From what I gathered from these tweets, the DOA community does not seem very fond of the FGC. Apparently the FGC are very prudish when it comes to DOA. This is all new to me. Like I said, I played DOA very, very casually. The last time I actually played DOA was a couple of years ago. This individual says probably why he also thinks for DOA to be successful, it needs to tone down the over-sexualization. His delusion has layers. Yogensha says DOA 6 failed because it dialed things back just like you asked. They shouldn't listen to you, nor any pro player complaining about being embarrassed to play. Play something else if you're worried about optics. Leave my favorite fighting game franchise alone. Now, when I read that, I was a bit confused. Are people embarrassed to play DOA in front of other people? Is that a thing? Because I always used to pop it on. I didn't care who was in the room. It wasn't so over the top that I was going to be embarrassed even if a family member walked in. It never seemed like it went that far. I mean, it's definitely more revealing than all the other fighting games. I'd say by quite a margin, but it's not literally corn, is it? I don't know. I've never been embarrassed. If I was very good at DOA and I went to EVA to compete, I wouldn't be embarrassed to get on stage. People care too much about what other people think, in my opinion. I don't care about the optics of it. If I'm having fun and the game is fun to look at, then why do you care what other people think? I didn't know that this was a sentiment that is shared in the FGC. I'm not entirely sure if it is. If it is, then I say just play the game with your chest, man. If that's your favorite game, play it with your whole chest. Don't worry about what other people think. V says, dial back the over-sexualization means not only I won't buy it, but every merchandise like t-shirts and figurines will either sell less or not at all. Costumes and DLC will sell less too. Why are you giving them awful advice? Again, I have to agree with this. Regardless of what you think about horny gamers that just want to buy DOA for over-sexualization, the fact of the matter is that this game was built off of over-sexualization. It's part of the reason that I was attracted to it in the first place. I remember seeing that game when I was a little bit younger and being like, oh, what the hell is this? And I turned it on, I was like, oh, this is like M-rated Tekken. That's my initial thought when I saw DOA, and I actually thought it was pretty cool. The game actually turned out to be a lot of fun. The strike, throw, hold system that they have in it, I don't get it completely. I'm not very good at it. I know one beats the other and then the other beats the other, but it was actually pretty good. It seemed more like you had to learn about reading your opponent, more so in DOA than other games, because if you threw like a punch, I guess you could do a hold or a throw. I don't know. They countered each other. I thought it was really cool, but I never really got into it. This individual said, there's only 2 buttons in DOA. It's not even a real fighting game. You take out the sex and it will be dead on arrival. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about it not being a real fighting game. Like I said, there is a competitive scene no matter how small it might be. So to say it's not a real fighting game, maybe that's not entirely fair. Maybe it's a simple one. I don't know. Maybe it is purely just about reading your opponent, so maybe you don't need that many buttons. But yeah, if you take away the sex appeal from this game, yes, Dead or Alive will be dead on arrival. It won't sell. Enraged Gamer says the whole point of DOA was sexy/cool characters, beautiful, cool, and or sexy aesthetic, kicking the shit out of each other with good physics. Take that away, might as well not have Dead or Alive. In my opinion, the game series cannot and should not survive without said aesthetics. Can't disagree with that. Because he's gay and he hates women. In my head, I just imagine Duke Nukem saying that as well. It's obviously a joke, but I can picture Duke Nukem saying that, and I thought it was pretty hilarious. Legends live forever. Shout out to Akira Toriyama, because it's morally right that they should go out of business to appease this person. Meme Gene says, remove the unnecessary meter mechanics. Yes, I guess that goes back to what I was saying. People weren't very happy with this meter thing, although I didn't play DOA 6, so I'm not entirely sure. Dial back on the overt sexualization/competitive. No, that's why 6 didn't even last a year, and now it's 6 foot under. Yeah, so from what I've heard, they tried to lean into the competitive scene a lot more, and they tried to dial back the sexualization to obviously appear on TV and appear on these different networks, and it just backfired on them horribly. Dial back on the overt sexualization of the female cast so everyone can fully embrace the game's competitive potential. In other words, make this game for modern audiences who won't play the game but use it as a political soapbox. This game has a tiny competitive scene anyway, so why would you cater to those people? It doesn't really make any sense. You should cater to the people that are going to buy your game, which are going to be the casual people. In my opinion, esports is largely populated by adults. Can we all just be adults and just accept the game for what it is? I mean, I don't understand what the problem is. It's just a bit of skin, guys. It's not the end of the world. It can be its own thing. It doesn't have to be like everything else. The appeal of Dead or Alive was the fan service, but it also happened to be a great fighting game. Why do you want to strip DOA of its core identity? The reason we had all of those tournaments in DOA 5 was because of how much those DLCs were selling. DOA 6 is proof of what happens when you take away what made the franchise popular and profitable in the first place. Now, on the topic of DLCs, wouldn't it be better for the company to make more skimpy outfits for the female characters because they have less to model and less to put together? I mean, if you're just selling bikinis for like £1 or $1, surely that's not going to take too much development time because you're creating very skimpy outfits. It's not like you're creating a whole costume for like Jin in Tekken 6 where you've got a lion head on one side of your shoulder and a cape and everything. You're essentially creating stars on nipples, right? I mean, give the fans what they want. If that's going to sell and keep your company afloat and the fans are happy with it, then I say do it. And if you'd like some extra advice from somebody that's not really into DOA, Stellar Blade's on its way. Why don't you go speak to those guys and say, hey, can we get Eve in the next DOA game? She kind of falls in line with the aesthetic. You know, we'll give the people what they want. That game's very fan servicey. We're very fan servicey. It's a match made in heaven. I'd say Eve is a perfect guest character for Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive without sexualization is like a car without its engine. That franchise wouldn't exist to begin with if it wasn't for horny consumers. I mean, he's right. He's right. That's what people know it for. That's what people want. Just give them what they want. Goes to sushi restaurant, 1 burger, please. I mean, that kind of sums everything up. That should be the name of this video. That is a perfect tweet. We all know what we're buying when we buy Dead or Alive, okay? We should stop pretending that it's something that isn't or trying to push it into a sphere that it doesn't really belong in. The FGC will never, ever accept DOA. They hate holds. Period. Toning down the sexuality will only make the game an even bigger flop than DOA 6, since you'll be alienating the only people that actually support the game, as DOA 5U and LR very clearly showed. Yeah, I wasn't entirely aware that the FGC had such a problem with DOA. I guess it's because of all the jiggle physics and that, and I guess everyone's embarrassed to play it on stage. But if the FGC has a problem with it and they're not really the ones that are playing it and it's just for the wider audience, then I don't think they should really bother chiming in on this conversation. DOA without sexy is like Mortal Kombat without gore. It only took that little bit of censorship in DOA 6 to have their fanbase reject it. Going full updated for modern audiences would be its death. Yeah, I have to agree with that. If you took the gore out of Mortal Kombat, you would basically be sending it to an early grave. I'm pretty sure that even with Mortal Kombat's popularity, people would not stick around for that. That's why I always encourage push the violence to the absolute extreme that you can take it with Mortal Kombat, because that's what it's known for and that's what people like. I think DOA should do the same. What are you, gay? Do attractive women scare you or something? Oh, people on Twitter are quite funny. Fattest way to ruin the game, esports can suck it if it can't handle some jiggle. I agree. Now, those were some of the funnier tweets in my opinion, but he did receive some pretty nasty tweets. I've only taken a few screen grabs of some of them. Again, I don't think you should be bringing someone's race into it. I think it's a bit weak and it's low hanging to take it there. We can talk about the game. Yes, I think his take is stupid. Yes, I think if the company listened to somebody like him, the game will tank even further than it already has, and that will be the last time we ever see DOA. I think they should listen to their wider consumer base and basically just ignore the competitive players. They can try to make the system as competitive as it needs to be, but they should definitely make the things that brought DOA to the forefront the main topic and the center of the development cycle. They can make the game competitive on the side as well. You can have both things. You don't have to get rid of one for the other, but esports does need to pucker up and just deal with it. Deal with a bit of jiggle physics on screen. I mean, the thing that kills me about esports and the thing that kills me about the people in esports is that all of these people watch anime. All of these people play these games, and yet when they're on screen, they all cringe and they turn into little like balls of embarrassment, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. He tweeted out here saying, button check, IGN emails, blogs, and more. It appears I was crucified for the greater good of DOA. That's the duty of a true Hokage. Now flourish and become great. There's always beauty in the midst of chaos. Obviously, he's blown a bit of smoke up his ass. It's not for DOA's greater good. Listen to me, bro. If you like DOA, then you should probably not be pushing this stuff. If the developers listen to you and we look at what happened to DOA 6, then the game is going to perish, and that will be the last time we ever get a DOA game. Now, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I enjoy DOA very casually, but I'm very clearly more of a Tekken man. But if you want your game to come out and do well, then you should listen to me, somebody that's a casual with the game. I won't buy it if they take away the things that I've known it for, and I'm guessing most people won't either. Most people don't really care about the FGC, if I'm being completely honest. Whilst I make my videos as objectively as I can, and I make them speaking from my understanding of how fighting games work, both in the FGC and on the casual side, I can say with DOA, with almost full confidence, the FGC part is irrelevant. Momiji said, yes, let's take away what made made the franchise popular to begin with and catered to the pedos in the FGC. That totally works with DOA 6, yeah. So this is getting a bit more vitriolic now. And then he replied, I never said take it away, dial that shit back some. If I want to play a softcore corn game, then I'll play DOA Extreme. Fuck out of here, I want DOA to have balance, maintain the sex appeal, but don't make it the focal point. Take your horny asses to Dead or Alive Extreme and play volleyball. This guy definitely wants his fighting game to die. I'm sorry, bro. I hear what you're trying to say. I know you're a competitive player. It is in your bio that you're trying to become the best Street Fighter player. I've checked out your YouTube page, but that's not where the game needs to focus all of its resources. It needs to focus its resources in what brought it to the forefront. It's amusing how suddenly these DOA enthusiasts emerge from the woodworks at the mere mention of toning down the sex appeal a bit. Yet when it comes to the game itself, they're quiet as fuck. Am I the only one who's confused with DOA's storyline, or should the focus be on titties? Bro, listen, no one cares about DOA's storyline. I hate to break it to you. No one cares. You are all of 2 people on the planet that probably care, and the other one's looking at you in the mirror. No one cares about DOA's storyline. Yes, people care about the sex appeal in DOA. The gameplay can be competitive. There's no issue with that whatsoever. But the aesthetic needs to appeal to the people that were purchasing the game beforehand. DOA 6 is already there. The blueprint is already there. They've already done it once, and the game is basically dead as it is. We don't even know if there's a DOA 7 coming out. Now, I'm not a DOA enthusiast. I'm just speaking objectively. Objectively speaking, DOA tanked the franchise. Do you want your game to tank, or do you want it to come out and do well? You gotta pick a lane here. Oh my god, this is the worst fighting game fan base ever. The comments are insane. I never knew it was this bad. DOA is cooked. These guys do not care about the fighting. And then he replied, until they acknowledge the glaring issue, the DOA fan base will continue to be disrespected and laughed upon. No one takes DOA players seriously, and there's a significant reason behind it. It's embarrassing because DOA players are some of the most talented players in the FGC. Now, I don't know about them being the most talented or some of the most talented, but I don't know why anyone cares about them laughing at your favorite game. Why would I care? What is this? This is nonsense. This is childish. You can't be so insecure that you want the game to change so that you don't get laughed at. Who is disrespecting DOA players anyway? This is all news to me. Maybe this has gone over my head. Maybe I'm not educated enough on the DOA situation, but I've never known people to laugh at DOA. I mean, I held a whole party in my house with people that don't even play fighting games. These were just randomers in my house. And DOA was on the TV. The girls were playing it. The guys were playing it. Everyone was drinking, having a good time. Nobody was laughing. They weren't laughing at me when I picked that wrestler. I don't even know what her name is. The wrestler with the big boobs. No one laughed at me. I think people are just a bit insecure and they care too much about what other people think. DOA does not need to change. If anything, it needs to lean more into what made it popular. And yes, most DOA fans are going to care less about the fighting, because when you play DOA, at least in my experience, whilst it is a lot of fun, it's definitely not as nuanced, complex, or has the systems in place that games like Street Fighter or Tekken or Virtua Fighter have. Someone said to him, don't pretend to be a DOA fan. He goes, WTF, how do you pretend being a DOA fan like it's a privilege or something? I've been covering the game for years purely out of love. I grew up on classics like DOA 2, DOA 3, and DOA 4. Long before Marie Rose even existed, Ryu Hayabusa was my gateway to DOA, not a lolly, bro. He then says, it seems I've become the Victor Donovan of the DOA community. All it took was a simple nerf titties and y'all swarmed in like a pack of hungry wolves. DOA 6 died due to many factors, not its sex appeal. What's more important, the $100 DLC season pass or the enjoyment of the game. I think DOA died for multiple reasons. There's a couple of YouTubers that I looked into before I made this video, and it seems that DOA did die because of the lack of sexualization as well as the DLC practices. It seemed like those were the 2 major factors. There were a couple of other things that they mentioned, but those seem to be the 2 major factors. People were very, very unhappy with the DLC practices, and they just weren't happy with how the game was presented. Then on top of that, people weren't happy with this new meta system. I think it's fair to acknowledge all of them. I'd be willing to bet that the lack of sexualization would turn people away, and then the people that purchase the game are going to look at the DLC and be like, I'm not dealing with that, I'm out. He then says, in the end, it's cool to see fans express their passion for DOA, but one thing we can all agree on, if Team Ninja doesn't execute the next game properly, it might be our last Dead or Alive game. No other fighting game comes close for me, so please Team Ninja, take your time. I agree with that sentiment. They should take their time, but they definitely shouldn't listen to you. What they should do is they should look at what made the game fail previously. They should look at what their fans are saying, because if I'm being completely honest, there's not many of them. Let's just be completely honest about it. DOA does not have the sway that Tekken and Street Fighter does, or even a Virtua Fighter in my opinion. But they should listen to their fan base. They should listen to the people that purchase their game, not a competitive scene that is even smaller than all of its rivals and competitors are already in a small scene. Yogensha says, says, you aren't that important or even half as cool. Don't inflate your own ego just because you like to run your mouth and farm engagement for it. The only way to do DOA right is by not toning down anything, maybe even tone it up out of spite while still improving gameplay. I agree with that. I believe that the aesthetic should be toned up because that's what people enjoy about the game, and also maintain solid gameplay. He responds with, who the F are you? Have you ever made guides, supplied news updates, or hosted big events to grow the DOA community like I did along with other DOA creators? No, you actually didn't, so you're the irrelevant one. I'd like to think at one point I was pretty important to DOA. I don't mean to sound harsh when I say this, but I'm going to kind of repeat myself, but I feel like I have to with this part of the conversation. In the wider scale, in the grand scheme of things, I would say this individual, Zachary or Zachary, you are largely irrelevant. If you look at the history of DOA and you look at where it succeeded and failed, what you're advocating for is more failures. The fact that you made guides and you supplied news updates and you hosted big events is all great, but we already know the FGC is very, very small. In a game like Mortal Kombat or Tekken that have massive player bases, the FGC section of that is like 1%, and your game is even smaller than those two games. So think about how many people play this game seriously. It's not to throw your work under the bus, and I don't mean any disrespect when I say that, so don't take it that way, but if you look at it realistically, your guides, your events, your news updates are largely insignificant in the grand scheme of things. It's not to say you shouldn't stop doing it. It's not to say if a new DOA comes out that you shouldn't do those things, but I definitely don't think you should push your ideas onto the developers or onto anybody else when really the ideas that you have belong to a niche that already exists in a niche. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, man, but this is classic DOA community. It is why I kind of don't bother with it. I don't hate the games like that, but this community is tier. It is what it is. Team Ninja created an entire separate series called DOA Extreme, which includes all the horny shit they're crying about with unlimited pretty females to enjoy, dress up and jerk off to. But no, it's not enough. They want to destroy the fighting game also. I mean, what destroyed the fighting game is exactly what you're asking for them to remove. The problem with this whole argument is that the writing is on the wall. Yes, there were other things that destroyed DOA, but it's not just me saying this. It's not just IGN people reaching out to you. There are people that have covered this on YouTube before. It's a well-known fact. The DLC and the lack of sexualization and trying to move into esports where you're basically advocating for them to go is what killed the game. That is a fact. That's not a disputable thing. That is objective reality. Beyond disturbing to see DOA fans sliding into my DMs wishing death over a fan service post, never imagined the community would turn into a cult, trying to exile one of its kindest members after everything I've done for DOA, but I'm waving the white flag, time to move on. Now, what I would say is I'm not giving you advice, I'm just basically talking to everybody else here. You do what you want. I don't think you should ever say I'm one of the kindest members. Usually people that have to go around telling people they're a good person or they're kind, you know, it usually goes the other way. I'm just saying. I'm not giving advice here, but that's how people will perceive it, especially on Twitter. On the topic of sending him death threats, that's just insane. I mean, yes, his take is stupid in my opinion, but sending him death threats, his whole life you want to end? That's mad. On the flip side, if people are sending you death threats, you need to let those be known. Everybody says this when they get a bit of heat on Twitter. I tend to not believe people when they're saying this, otherwise you need to provide receipts, and I think you should. People that are wishing for your life to come to an end are unhinged psychopaths. They're sick in their head over a game, and I think you should expose those people. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't think you received any death threats. At the very most, you probably received a bit of trolling. You definitely received some racism because I saw that. But death threats, I don't know, man. People seem to lean on that all the time. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I've seen people in the FGC provide receipts, but unless you're going to provide receipts, I don't really think it's worth mentioning in my opinion. I apologize for mixing the actual DOA community with these clowns. I gave them the dub and they're still harassing me. Esports wannabe is hilarious though. Can someone explain why these weirdos keep referencing esports all the time? Wasn't DOA for the first esports fighter? And then there's a screenshot here that says either block me or die because you angered the mob. Okay, well, I take back the wishing death on him then. I take that back. I don't know what's wrong with people. Honestly, getting to the point where you tell somebody die, that is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Shame on you for doing that. Shame on you. And I apologize. You know, I jumped the gun. We're so wished to seeing people issue statements where they're like, oh, I got death threats, and you never see anything. But fair enough. He provided receipts. This individual went on to say, keep crying esports wannabe. We love our fan service here, sweetheart. Either kick the grave or find a job, honey. I mean, listen, Yukito Zuma, you're a psycho. God forbid anybody that has to deal with you. Anyone that behaves like this over a video game, you are unhinged. You need to go outside and touch grass. I know people have told me that before, but these are the people that actually need to do it. It's a video game. Yes, this individual has a bad take on DOA. Yes, I disagree with him. Yes, I think his take will plunge DOA even further into the abyss. Does that mean that I want his life to go away just because he has advocated for something that nobody else agrees with? What is wrong with you people? Honestly. Even this individual here, all the clout farming to only have 14 people watching your stream. I don't know why you would laugh at that. I hate when people bring up numbers. It's so silly. 14 people watching you play. There's still 14 people watching you play. People get so hung up on numbers. So already this Mr. Wonderful is coming across like an idiot. And he laughs at him. How come your monkey ass ain't playing Zach? Now obviously Zach is a black man. And then he goes, you blacks must be taught at a young age to act fake offended over things you don't really care about. I'd give up the streaming. Dak 1. Mr. Wonderful, take your head out of your ass, mate. We're talking about a video game here. Do you know how stupid you look? Just because the man disagrees with your train of thought, maybe he's given a take you don't like, you bring race into it and you insult him because he's only got 14 people watching this stream. You're a jackass. You're the kinds of people that this community doesn't need. Obviously, you're going to be on Twitter. You're going to say whatever you're going to say, but just let it be known. For anyone that watches my video, if this is how you behave, don't chat to me, okay? Don't send me messages because I'll just flame you. I've got no problem flaming you. Sticks and stones for me, but if I'm being objective here, when we talk about games, even when we talk about the people that we dislike, where they're trying to bring certain things into games that we disagree with, you don't wish death upon them. You don't bring their race into it. You don't start saying things like you blacks or you whites or whatever it might be. Honestly, it's just madness. Like, people have become too brave talking shit behind the computer. These are not the kinds of things that you would say to someone's face, because we know what happens when you talk like this in someone's face. So again, Zach's take on DOA, yes, it's a lame take in my opinion, but talking to him like this, what is wrong with you people, honestly? And then he did go on to appear on Emery Reigns' YouTube channel, or his Twitch, I believe it was uploaded to his YouTube channel, and I watched the whole thing. It was quite interesting. I think you guys should go and watch it, but this first opening clip from the podcast is what I wanted to reference, so I'll play it for you guys real quick here.
Listen, bro, you know what upsets me? When we were struggling to get entrants for DOA 6 tournaments, when there was a $90,000 world championship, where were you motherfuckers at? Now we're going to get to the point where we have to be honest here. 20,000 likes on a fucking tweet? Where the fuck were y'all? I get it, you're not expected to show up, but like, we needed y'all motherfuckers, man.
So what I wanted to say in reference to that is kind of what I was talking about earlier. DOA doesn't really have much of a competitive scene. Emery saying that to me doesn't really make sense, because even though I'm making this video, even though that tweet got a lot of views, even though it was picked up by IGN, even though Button Check covered it, none of these people see DOA as a competitive game. You don't have to see DOA as a competitive game or show up to tournaments to have a voice in the discussion. And I think that the competitive players often forget that they are a small number of people that play these games, and that number is going to be even smaller for DOA. So in this case, it doesn't really make any sense to say, where were you guys when we needed you? They're not going to be here for DOA 7, DOA 8 or DOA 9. They are casual players, and they are ultimately the people that drive the sales of the game. Now, whilst I do like my games to retain their competitive edge, and I do think that DOA should have a competitive edge, it makes the game more fun, it increases longevity, I don't think they should strip away the sexualization to appease the esports crowd. The esports people, they just need to man up, deal with it, deal with some jiggle physics on their screen. Everything is going to be okay. Don't worry about it. You're not going to get a citation, and keep it moving. But in terms of the competitive scene, it is so tiny that it's kind of a moot point. They're not going to show up. So that's all I really wanted to talk about today, guys, with regards to DOA. I did think it was a very interesting conversation. I did think it was quite funny as well. But again, taking it beyond the game and talking about race and death is just ridiculous. But I want to know what you guys think about this. What direction should Dead or Alive go in? Do you think that Zach is onto something here? Do you think I'm in the right? Do you think the people that left tweets on this comment section were in the right? Obviously not the crazy people. Let me know in the comment section below. Do you guys want to see DOA back? I'll chat to you guys real soon. Take care and peace.